Of all the types of aerial combat, there is one that has captured our imagination for more than 100 years, dogfights, or close aerial combat. There's nothing quite like the sight of 2-ton weighing machines maneuvering at supersonic speeds to get into just the right spot to kill an enemy. It is a shocking, deadly dance. However, by the nature of these missions, there is rarely any material left to actually observe what these fights are like. Today, in Military Aviation, we want to show you an amazing and unique video of its kind. 2 North American F-14 Tomcats versus 2 Libyan MiG-23 Floggers locked in mortal combat, in a duel that could have sparked a bloody war but instead left some mysteries that remain unanswered to this day. Join us to learn all the secrets of this dogfight captured on camera. By January 1989, relations between the United States and Libya had been in constant tension for more than a decade, always on the verge of hostilities over territorial and geopolitical disputes. Since Muammar Gaddafi's rise to power in 1969, and with the profits from oil exports, the African country has become a safe haven for many organizations that the US classifies as terrorists. Libya claimed that the Gulf of Sidra, a wide inlet of the Mediterranean Sea, was its territorial waters, and that any presence in that area constituted an invasion and was susceptible to a military response. The United States was not willing to recognize these demands, so it maintained a constant presence in the area. After a long time playing with fire, the flames of war have finally reached both countries. On January 4, 1989, the American aircraft carrier USS John Kennedy was sailing through the Mediterranean Sea carrying dozens of aircraft from its combat wing, although it was not an offensive mission. The U.S. ship was conducting training in the vicinity of the Gulf of Sidra. 2 F-14s and an E-2 Sentry were sent to carry out an exercise that was completed shortly. Obviously, this circumstantial violation of the Libyan space set off alarm bells in Tripoli, and Gaddafi was not willing to be intimidated. The USS John Kennedy crew got a big surprise when they saw on their radars 2 MiG-23 Floggers taking off from a nearby base. The units were heading straight for the carrier in an offensive formation. Faced with this apparent hostility, 2 F-14 Tomcats identified as Gypsy 202 and Gypsy 207 took off, with the aim of intercepting and deterring this potential attack.
Gypsy 207, contact 175, 72 miles. Looks like a flight of 2, Angels 10.
Close out, concurs, showing 78 miles.
What you have just seen is the front camera and the base communication of one of the 2 Tomcats that participated in the combat with the Libyan MiG-23s. The file corresponds to the beginning of the North American response, when the hostilities had not yet started. Beyond the noise and confusion, this brief excerpt allows us to know the specific ship, that is, to Gypsy 207, the distance of 72 miles, and the altitude of 10,000 feet, or 3,000 meters, which is expressed as Angels 10.
Gypsy 207, contact 175, 72 miles. Looks like a flight of 2, Angels 10.
Close out, concurs, showing 78 miles.
Throttle back just a little bit here.
As the file progresses, it is evident how the tension in communications increases. The maneuvers of the North American pilots do not give results. Attempts to establish a reconnaissance contact were useless. The F-14s had to perform maneuvers to avoid a direct collision with the Soviet production machinery. This is how a simple training mission turned into a dogfight that would go down in history for being caught on camera. The Tomcats were concerned that the Libyan aircraft were armed with air-to-air weapons, in particular the Soviet AA-7 Apex missiles, or Vimpel 23, both of which have an effective range of up to 2 kilometers. An ideal dagger for close combat, where the enemy is face-to-face. For this, the USS John Kennedy aircraft carrier team warned their pilots, and authorized them to open fire if they suspected that the MiG-23's intentions were hostile. The F-14s positioned themselves below the Floggers, in an attempt to confuse Soviet radar for enemy machinery. The American pilots performed 5 turns, a maneuver intended to discourage the MiG-23s from continuing their advance, but the Libyans imitated those aerobatics, upping the ante and showing that they were not there to play games. Faced with this response, the Americans prepared their weapons, positioning themselves some 20 kilometers from their objectives. Gypsy 207 fired an AIM-7 Sparrow air-to-air missile, but the round was ineffective and failed to find its target. It was then that Gypsy 202 imitated its partner and opened fire, this time at a distance of only 15 kilometers, however, this too missed. The Tomcats were forced to perform a defensive maneuver, a simultaneous turn in which each turned in the opposite direction of the other, but the result was not at all as expected. Suddenly, the Gypsy 202 was pursued by the 2 Libyan fighters, completely at the mercy of their weapons. Before the chase ended in tragedy for the American pilot, an AIM-7 missile fired by his partner crossed the skies over the Mediterranean Sea and turned one of the MiG-23s into a ball of fire. This is what was lived in the cabin of the Gypsy 207 at that precise moment.
Turning into me. Roger that. 5 miles. 4 miles.
Okay, he's got a missile off.
Breaking right.
Good hit on one.
Roger that. Good kill.
I've got the other one. Select Fox 2. I got Fox 2.
Out of the trailer. Coming hard, stop.
So fucking shoot him. I haven't got a tone.
Got the second one.
I got the second one on the nose right now.
Gypsy 207 positioned itself behind the remaining Soviet ship, however completing the hunt was far from easy. The American pilot had major complications in order to obtain the objective of the second MiG-23. Keep in mind that this happened in a few seconds, while his partner was within range of the enemy. The pressure was enormous and each moment lasted an eternity. After various difficulties, Gypsy 207 fired an AIM-9 Sidewinder which shot down the last Libyan fighter. The reaction of the pilot and the aircraft carrier team spoke for itself.
Lock him up. Can't shoot him, Fox 2. I can't. I don't have a fucking tone. So what? Good kill.
Hey, good kill. Pilot ejected. Pilot ejected out of the second one.
Okay, Maestro, let's head north.
Okay. Port side, high, I'm coming down high.
Good kill, the victory was complete and it was time to withdraw in case more enemy aircraft arrived on the scene. Already on board the USS John Kennedy, the Tomcat pilots reported seeing their rivals parachute down, falling still alive into the Mediterranean waters. A few days after the combat between the F-14s and the MiG-23s, the Libyan government claimed that the Floggers were unarmed reconnaissance aircraft. Gaddafi even called an emergency meeting of the United Nations to report the territorial violation and the aggressive U.S. response. From Washington, they responded that the pilots of the Gypsy 202 and 207 acted in self-defense, and that they opened fire only after trying on numerous occasions to dissuade the advance of the Libyan ships towards the aircraft carrier. Defense Secretary Frank Carlucci even claimed that the pilots had fired too late, that the situation demanded a response from the moment the carrier's radars detected the MiGs. To resolve this international debate that could have turned into a war over the Mediterranean Sea and the Gulf of Sidra, the cameras of one of the Tomcats were used, which were mounted below the nose of the aircraft. The material, beyond being somewhat blurry, demonstrated without the possibility of discussion that the MiG-23 had air-to-air missiles to engage in hostilities with their North American counterparts. It should also be clarified that the investigations showed that the Floggers never turned on their fire control radars, therefore, they were not ready to use those Vimpel 23s, at least not immediately. This added more doubts to the situation, since they undertook hostile maneuvers without being prepared to pull the trigger. To this day, the crew of the Libyan pilots remain a mystery. Why did they head straight for the aircraft carrier without their systems ready to open fire? Why did they imitate combat maneuvers, but not take advantage of the situation to shoot down an enemy aircraft as precious as the F-14? Perhaps the most incredible question, and the one that will never be answered, is whether the men who ejected from the Libyan fighters were rescued and what their fate was once they returned to the country. Their identities are not known, nor were they participants in the long international discussion that took place after the incident. They became ghosts, faceless and nameless. The duel over the Mediterranean Sea left behind one of the most important archival videos in the history of close dogfights. Rarely has it been seen so clearly what these deadly encounters between machines designed for war consist of. Beyond the result and the mysteries that still have no answer, this recording is one of the most precious materials in the recent history of military aviation. This is how we come to the end of this video. If you want to continue learning about these types of stories, we invite you to subscribe and activate notifications. For the moment, we say goodbye until the next episode.